In today's video, we're covering another US highway, this one being US 10. US 10 is 713.18 miles beginning in West Fargo, North Dakota at I-94 and ending in Bay City, Michigan at I-75, going through North Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Here is the start of US 10 in West Fargo, and we get no control city, we only have Main Avenue signed. On US 10, we see our first reassurance shield that we are on US 10, and we're also on Business 94. At an interchange with I-29, we're still signed for Main Avenue, but we're also signed for downtown Fargo and West Fargo, and I-29 North is signed for nothing. This is the best picture I could find of downtown Fargo on US 10. This is the border crossing to Minnesota on the Red River. As you can tell, there is a Minnesota flag up there. We don't see a Welcome to Minnesota sign for another mile, but in Moorhead, we now turn left to stay on US 10, concurring with US 75. And literally 0.1 mile down the road, we have to turn right again to stay on US 10 and US 75. Oh, here's the Welcome to Minnesota State sign I was talking about earlier, but the thing that's weird about this one is that this one is different from most of the other ones. Most of them look like this, but this one is just a regular sign. It's weird. In Moorhead, US 10 receives a pretty far control city for a US highway, this being Detroit Lakes, which actually makes sense. On the mileage sign, we have Dilworth in 2 miles, Glendon in 8, and Detroit Lakes, our actual control city, in 43. And I'm also going to take advantage of this very distant control city and skip all the way to Detroit Lakes. In Detroit Lakes, US 10 has an interchange with US 59 and Minnesota Highway 34 and is now signed east for Wadena, another distant control city. This probably isn't the best picture of downtown Detroit Lakes, but this is what we got. And once again, the mileage signs are being consistent, having Frazee in 9 miles, Perham in 21, and Wadena, the control city, in 44. And also, I'm taking advantage of this again and skipping all the way to Wadena. In downtown Wadena, we have an interchange with US 71 signed north for Park Rapids and south for Long Prairie. Both are good choices, but besides the point, US 10 is signed east for Staples, which isn't the worst, but I think it should be Little Falls or even St. Cloud, but not Staples. Even the mileage signs have Staples as a control city in 18 miles and Verndale in 6, with zero mention of Little Falls or St. Cloud. In Staples, we get no control city, but we do have an interchange with Minnesota Highway 210, and we're now going to run concurrently with it. But on the mileage sign, we have Little Falls as our control city in 37 miles, and Motley as our secondary, where Minnesota Highway 210 breaks off of US 10 for Brainerd in 7 miles. In Little Falls, US 10 becomes a divided highway, and this is our exit for Little Falls. In downtown Little Falls, US 10 is now finally signed east for St. Cloud. And the mileage signs are also saying it having Royalton in 10 miles and St. Cloud, our control city, in 32. Sorry for the poor street view quality, this is the best I could get, but besides that, here's the exit for Minnesota Highway 23, which leads you into St. Cloud, and US 10 is now signed for St. Paul. This probably isn't the best view of downtown St. Cloud, but I had to get off of US 10 for this, so it's the best you're getting, I'm sorry. I couldn't find any mileage signs for a reason I'll explain later, so I had to skip all the way to Minneapolis-St. Paul Metro, but besides that, US 10 has an interchange with US 169, and is now running concurrent with its side for Anoka and not St. Paul, which I actually think is fair because in between cities, there's faster interstate routes that you could take that would get you to St. Paul faster than going on US 10. But on the mileage signs, we at least get a mention of St. Paul in 36 miles and Anoka in 10. In Anoka, we get no control city, sadly, for US 10. And also, sadly, we don't get normal mileage signs. We only have mileage signs for the upcoming exits. In Mounds View, we meet I-35W signed north for Duluth, a great choice, and south, which we concur with, signed for St. Paul for US 10, and Minneapolis for I-35W. The concurrency is only for around 2 miles, so I didn't bother finding a mileage sign, but here is where US 10 breaks off of I-35W, still signed for St. Paul. US 10 doesn't go very long before it concurs with another interstate. In Arden Hills, US 10 concurs with I-694, and in typical Twin Cities spur-off fashion, we get no control cities. And just like earlier, we don't get normal mileage signs, only the upcoming exits. When I-694 and US 10 meet I-35E, US 10 now concurs with I-35 east and south for St. Paul. I tried finding a mileage sign, but I couldn't, sadly, so we're skipping to the I-94 interchange where US 10 joins I-94 east side for Wakuta Street and has no control city. US 10 is only with I-94 for a very short distance, and when it breaks off, it has US 61 join along with it, and none of the highways out of the three have any control city. Here's the reason why I couldn't find any mileage signs between St. Cloud and the Twin Cities. It's because instead of mileage signs, they are replaced with these adopt the highway signs, and this is also preventing me from finding mileage signs here. When we meet I-494, we're now signed east for Hastings. Once again, we have another adopt the highway sign instead of a mileage sign. Also, sorry for the bad picture, there was a truck blocking the sign. In Hastings, US 10 and US 61 split, and US 10 turns left for Prescott, which is in Wisconsin, and US 61 is signed south for Hastings because we do not enter downtown Hastings. After what almost feels like forever, we finally see a normal mileage sign having Prescott in 3 miles. This is where the Minnesota-Wisconsin state line is on the St. Croix River. As you can tell, there's a Wisconsin flag over there. As soon as we cross into Wisconsin, US 10 turns left for Ellsworth and River Falls. Wisconsin is doing exactly what Minnesota did with its state welcome sign by giving it a mile in the state. US 10 wasn't actually signed for River Falls because we were running concurrently for Wisconsin Highway 35 and we're now signed east solely for Ellsworth. And right after that interchange, we have a mileage sign for Ellsworth and 16 miles. In Ellsworth, we're signed east for Baldwin and Durand. Baldwin is for US 63 because we're running concurrently with it, and Durand is for US 10. Also, if you want to go to River Falls again, you can turn left. Here is where US 63 splits off of US 10 signed north for Baldwin and Elmwood, and US 10 is still signed east for Durand. On the mileage sign, we have Plum City in 17 miles and our control city Durand at 28. In Durand, we meet Wisconsin Highway 25 signed north for Eau Claire and south for Nelson, great decisions, and we're signed east for Mondovi, the best decision in my opinion. On the mileage sign, we only have one city, this being Mondovi in 16 miles. In Mondovi, we have an interchange with County Road H and Wisconsin Highway 37. Wisconsin Highway 37 is signed south for Alma, and County Road H is signed north for Rock Falls, sensible places. But besides that, we're signed east for Eleva and Eau Claire. Eau Claire is there because we're running concurrent with Wisconsin Highway 37, and Eleva is for US 10. And here is the split with Wisconsin Highway 37, and it's still signed north for Eau Claire, and we are still signed east for Eleva. Even though just earlier Eleva was our control city, it now seems like it's being treated as a secondary, while Osseo is our primary in 22 miles. In Eleva, Osseo magically disappears and we're signed east for Strom, which is a horrible decision. Osseo is the best control city from here. Also, you can turn left if you want to go to Eau Claire for some reason. But on the mileage signs, we do get a mention of Osseo in 12 miles and Strom in 4. In Strom, we get no control city. I guess is why it should have made a control city itself. On the mileage signs, Osseo is now treated like a secondary, while Fairchild is our primary in 22 miles. In Osseo, we are still signed east for Fairchild. Just east of downtown Osseo, we meet I-94 and we are still signed east for Fairchild. In Fairchild, we're signed east for Neillsville and Maryland, Neillsville for US 10 and Maryland for US 12. East of Fairchild, we split from US 12 and US 12 was signed for Humbird and Black River Falls. Good decision, but weird how Maryland disappears. But anyways, we're still signed east for Neillsville. On the mileage signs, Neillsville is being treated like a secondary and have Marshfield as our primary, I guess, in 42 miles. In Neillsville, we are now signed solely for Marshfield. We can also turn right onto Wisconsin Highways 73 and 95 for Wisconsin Rapids. I couldn't find a more normal mileage sign, so we have this mileage sign for Granton in 1 mile. South of Marshfield, we mean Wisconsin Highway 80 signed south for Pittsville, which isn't that sizable, but it's the best decision. But anyways, US 10 is signed east for Marshfield and Stevens Point. In Marshfield, US 10 becomes a divided highway, and of course we get no control city, because why would we? On the mileage signs though, we can see our control city is Stevens Point in 29 miles, and we also have Auburndale in 5 miles and Junction City in 17. We're back at US 51 again somehow, but besides that, we're now signed for Stevens Point when this sign it should very well be Madison since we're concurrent with I-39. On the Stevens Point's exits mileage sign, we can see that we're breaking off of I-39 in 5¼ mile. When US 10 breaks off of I-39, we're signed east for Appleton, which is great signing all the way in Stevens Point. But on the mileage signs, Appleton disappears and we have Amherst in 13 miles and our control city, Wapaka, in 26. In Wapaka, Appleton comes back as our control city. And on the mileage signs, we have Appleton as our control city in 35 miles and our secondary, Berlin, in 32 miles. Outside of Appleton, we meet I-41 and we are running concurrent with Wisconsin Highway 441 and we receive no control city. In Appleton, US 10 and Wisconsin Highway 441 become a divided highway and we only get a through traffic sign with no control city. I had to get off view of US 10 for this, but here is a picture of downtown Appleton. Here's where US 10 breaks off of Wisconsin Highway 441 and we're signed for Oneida Street with no control city. Outside of Appleton, we meet Wisconsin Highway 114, signed east for Sherwood and Hilbert, the right decision, but anyways, we're now signed east for Manitowoc, the last city we meet in Wisconsin. In quite frankly, the middle of nowhere Wisconsin, we get a mileage sign having Brilliant in 15 miles, Reedsville in 28, Manitowoc, our control city in 35. We also meet I-43 in the middle of nowhere, signed for Milwaukee because of her concurrency with I-43. When we break off of I-43, we're signed east for Manitowoc and Sturgeon Bay. Sturgeon Bay is there because we meet Wisconsin Highway 42, which takes you to Sturgeon Bay. US 10 is an odd US highway because you have to take a ferry to get to the other part of US 10 in Michigan because of the big lake in the way that just might be a part of it, I don't know. Welcome to Pier Michigan. As soon as we cross Lake Michigan into Ludington, we immediately get a state welcome sign. East of Ludington, US 31 joins US 10, and we're signed for Clare and Traverse City. Clare is for US 10 and Traverse City is for US 31. On the mileage signs, Clare disappears and we have Scottville in 5 miles, Manistee in 27, and Reed City, our new control city, in 48. When US 31 breaks off of US 10, it appears Manistee was for US 31, but anyways, we're now signed east for Scottville and Reed City. North of Reed City, we meet US 131 and we're signed east for Clare again. On the mileage signs, we have a Vart in 11 miles and Clare in 38 miles, our control city. North of Clare, US 10 is now signed for Mount Pleasant and Midland. Mount Pleasant is for US 127 and Midland is for US 10. Here's where US 127 breaks off from US 10 and is signed south for Mount Pleasant and Lansing. Great signing there, and we are now signed east for Midland and Bay City. These two sides are signed perfectly. No, it can't be. Minnesota, what have you done to Michigan? We gotta adopt the highway signs again? In Midland, we are signed for our last control city, Bay City. I seriously could not be bothered to find another mileage sign, so here's the end of US 10 and I-75 and Michigan Highway 25, and US 10 actually gets end signs. I-75 is signed north for Mackinac Bridge and south for Saginaw. It should be South Detroit from here, and we default to Michigan Highway 25, which takes us into Bay City. The control city should be West Fargo, then downtown Fargo when you're in Fargo, then Detroit Lakes, then St. Cloud immediately because it's the fastest route from Detroit Lakes, then Anoka when we get to the Twin Cities, Mountain View because that's where you meet I-35W, Minneapolis because that occurs you with I-35W, St. Paul once you break off of I-35W, then Hastings, then Prescott, then Appleton because it's the fastest way to it from Prescott, then Manitowoc, then Ludington, which you can't really send on a ferry because I don't think that's how it works. Then Midland from Ludington because that's the fastest way to it. And then after that, finally, Bay City.